Back to the well of portable consoles, we find the grumpy Wii U wedged between the Game Boy and its successor, the Game Boy Color. This wasn't quite the huge leap between generations that later handhelds would prove to be, and you could feasibly roll the two libraries into one entry if you were so inclined, but the GBC had just enough exclusives to warrant its own place. In case you hadn't figured it out by now, I was pretty addicted to Pokemon at this point in my life. And now I had a glorious palette of 16 different colors to enjoy them in. And even a Pokemon-themed console, because I was cool with a capital K. As such, Pokemon Crystal was a constant and remains a contender for the greatest singular game in the franchise's history. It had animations, and a cheap-as-hell battle tower, and boobies. It was just top marks. To supplement this, Pokemon Puzzle Challenge's retelling of the narrative found in Tetris Attack, Anata wa Weibo dakara, Tokidoki peneru to Ponda, a friggin' marvelous Pokemon trading card game, and the incessant rumble of Pokemon Pinball helped to spread the tentacular reach of the white-hot franchise even further. Tentacle, 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 tentacle. But there's plenty to love about the GBC beyond that, from the unique connectivity of the Zelda Oracle titles to the gripping RPG Mario Tennis, where we first met the rising athlete stars Anthony and Booger. Booger. Also, this was the console where my Nana, bless her heart, took a wild swing in the dark in Christmas of 2000 and bought me a game with no prior knowledge whatsoever. And that game was Wario Land 3. Seriously, I don't know how she pulled that off. There would have been like over 1,000 games to choose from, most of them garbage, and she chose this beauty right here. Because I hadn't been properly exposed to the first two games in the series, this was my first taste of Wario madness, and boy, what a sweet taste it was! Kudos to you, Nana. Kudos. On that note, it's astounding just how far portable gaming would progress in a shoe fort years. Cool. After only launching in 1998, the Game Boy Color would be rendered obsolete by the Game Boy Advance in 2001, and it in turn would be bumped aside in 2004 by the next entry on this list, the Nintendo DS. I remember when I first saw the still images in the magazines. We had truly entered a new era of gaming, one where handhelds were no longer considered the lesser cousin of the home consoles. Now we had a system that could run graphic-intensive titles like Mario 64 and Madden, and even a first-person Metroid. Once you saw it in action, it was like, oh, okay. The blurry textures and low poly counts show that maybe they hadn't quite mastered the technology, especially when you compare it to what Sony were achieving on the PlayStation Portable at the time. But there's a reason why the DS is the second best-selling console of all time. New Super Mario Bros. Breathed life back into the dormant medium of 2D platformers. Mario Kart DS was another incredible success, and even allowed you to create your own logo that most often resembled a Pete. And hey, Animal Crossing Wild World not only let us take our happy little villagers with us wherever we went, but we even got to gain their trust and collect framed photos. I call it my snuff wall. On the Pokemon front, because you knew we'd get there eventually, we received not one but two generations, and even remasters of Gold and Silver for good measure. Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum may have the reputation of being the black sheep of the franchise, but they are still stellar titles regardless. As for Black and White, or more specifically Black 2, it ended up probably being my favorite title in the whole series. I know, it's a big claim, and to the casual observer they didn't really push a lot of boundaries, but they had a pretty good plot, a competent global trading system, and hidden abilities. That last one is huge because it completely changed the metagame, giving old unused Pokemon completely new utility. Since Gen 1, I had always had a Ninetales and a Venusaur on my team, and now because of their hidden abilities of Drought and Chlorophyll, they became a potent 1-2 punch who would rain terror until they nerfed it in Gen 6. Ah, for the brief times when we were beautiful. Taking a step back then, we continue the streak of handheld consoles. In much the same way that the Nintendo DS did when it was first unveiled, seeing what the Game Boy Advance was capable of blew my friggin' mind. It may be easy to dismiss nowadays, but you have to remember that before it came along, this was considered the standard. We hadn't really seen anything much more impressive than the Game Gear, which by the time I finished this sentence, would have run out of battery. It really was advanced. Rich colors, vibrant sound, and they chose to debut this cutting-edge hardware with a Super Mario Bros. 2 port. That's cool, I guess. Fortunately, the GBA would play host to much more ambitious titles in its comparatively short lifespan, from the introduction of the Rhythm Heaven series, to Golden Sun, and WarioWare too. In actuality, it was one of the bolder portables in the company's history, not only bringing new franchises into existence, but in the way it dared to alter cherished classics like Metroid and Zelda. Even Mario received a new spin-off of his own. Sure, it became a bit of a dumping ground for Super Nintendo ports, but considering how much I loved that console, I didn't really complain. Especially since Pokemon was firing on all cylinders with Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. And remasters of Gen 1 that ironed out its many flaws. About my only regret with this console is that I never got the chance to try out Super Dodgeball Advance. I don't know, it just looks like a good time, man. Killing people with balls, just like in the old country. Anyone got a spare copy they want to send my way? In return, I could give them Bubsy 2? This is getting really hard now. We're moving into territory not only from my favorite Nintendo consoles of all time, but my favorite consoles period. This next one is probably not going to be sitting here for too long. Claiming sixth place in these rankings is the... Coming in at sixth is the Nintendo Switch. An absolute juggernaut of a hybrid device that only gets better with each year that passes. Christ, sixth is a really awkward word to say. Trying to recover from the devastating blow to their coffers that was the Wii U, Nintendo clearly put everything they had into this one. And not only is it the most fascinating piece of technology I've ever wielded short of the iPhone's lightsaber app, vroom, 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 but it came crashing out of the gates like gangbusters. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a serious contender for the greatest launch title in the industry's history, and it claimed countless accolades as the 2017 Game of the Year. It managed this despite stiff competition from Sony, Microsoft, and even Nintendo. Super Mario Odyssey is a revelation. It is gaming nirvana. It's sweet, nourishing nectar. This sweet, nourishing nectar that evokes the fondest memories of yesteryear. Sometimes it tugs on those nostalgia strings, and oh, it tugs hard. But it doesn't rely on that, playing to its strengths with some of the most whimsical mechanics the portly plumber has ever seen. 2018 hasn't been quite as fiery as that debut, but that doesn't mean we've been left out in the cold. Octopath Traveler, Mario Tennis Aces, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and Bayonetta 1 and 2 done right. Plus the glorious influx of the Nindies. We're talking Celeste, Hollow Knight, Owlboy, Darkest Dungeon. It's just a good time all in all. Except for Darkest Dungeon, that game stressed me the hell out. This year promises to go out with a bang with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate lurking on the horizon. Not only are they adding long-awaited arrivals like Ridley and K. Rool, but they're finally reintroducing the most missed character in franchise history, Ivysaur. Believe that! I don't have the time or the energy to dedicate myself to a home console anymore. And though I initially assumed that I would most often be playing it in docked mode, the truth of the matter is that it has shone most brightly as a handheld system. Its versatility isn't just a gimmick, it's a selling point. I'm purportedly an adult now, so video games have to work around me, not the other way around. This is something the Switch does extraordinarily well, and when all is said and done, maybe it will end up being my favorite Nintendo console of all time.